Welcome back. What are we now? Day 26 of Hammerween. Oh, we're so close to the end. I can barely count this high. We are, of course, in our final vampire weekend, and with the final installment of the Karnstein trilogy today, Twins of Evil, 1971. Back in the day where you could do a whole trilogy in 18 months. Try and get that done these days. 18 months just to get your pitch meeting taken in Hollywood. So, as always, plot synopsis and review. We start with not an act of vampirism. Cushing finger, not an act of vampirism. We start with an act of witchcraft, or the fallout from it, perhaps, as we meet a young woman being burnt at the stake by the Brotherhood, who are this intensely Calvinist group of Puritans. So we understand instantly we must be, according to history, at least a couple of hundred years before the events of Lust for the Vampire. So we're in a prequel with this. They're dressed according to Lutheran styles and Calvinist styles, Puritan styles of the 17th century, not the 19th century where we left Lust for the Vampire. So this is very much a prequel. The town that this film is concerned with is called Karnstein, which would hitherto become a banned term, a damned word for the town. So very much a prequel, but we'll go into why some of that works, some of that doesn't work. The Brotherhood slaughter this young woman, burn her at the stake, and their leader, Gustav, returns home. Gustav being played by Peter Cushing. Peter Cushing returns to his nice little house with his wife, and they've got company waiting. His nieces from Vienna, who lost their parents a few months ago, they're waiting. They're going to be staying with them now as their wards. And they immediately upset him because only months after the parents died, they have the audacity to be wearing green and not black as decorum demands. So, rather wonderfully, when he sees them, he flies into the room in the first place as if he knows that something there is going to piss him off. But he's so angry, but everything probably pisses him off. Again, Calvinist, and says one of my favorite lines in a horror movie: "What plumage is this? The birds of paradise." Oh, that's that's good stuff. So the girls are rather shaken by their reintroduction to their uncle, who I don't think I'd be too down for sharing lodgings with, but they have little choice. They settle down. Peter Cushing, meanwhile, is called away by the Brotherhood, and they have another willing, or not so willing, I should say, victim who they think, yeah, I think she's probably a witch. How do you know she's a witch? Looks like one. She doesn't. She's just a normal blonde girl. So, based on absolutely nothing but my mate Reg down the pub says she's probably a witch, let's go and burn her. And they're all up for this. No one says, should we not have some kind of evidence, some kind of trial? I mean, even witch trials are a thing. That's they're bad. We're not even doing that. So what does that make us? So they try to burn her as well, but they're stopped because as they approach her house, they find that she's already with a lover there, so she must be a fallen woman after all. Maybe we can kill this lover as well. Oh wait, it's Count Karnstein. Count Karnstein himself. Uh-oh, we can't take on Count Karnstein. He's the head honcho around these parts. He has friends in the highest of offices, even the king's court, it said. So we'll let him off with a warning this time. Shouldn't have done that though, because for once the mob were right. Count Karnstein is evil. He's not a vampire though, but give it a few minutes. Count Karnstein goes home, sacrifices a young woman, and incidentally and almost accidentally, just because they need to fit it into the plot, the blood from this sacrifice drips onto a coffin and awakens Mircalla Karnstein from 100 years hence, who is now risen from the grave and says, "Well, thanks for that. I've been waiting a while. I'll tell you what, I'll return the favor and turn you into a vampire so that you can live forever." How does that sound? He says, "Smashing. Let's go with that. It sounds like a plan to me." She does so, and Markala Karnstein, the character who this trilogy has all been about, she was the main character in the last two films, Vampire Lovers and Lust for Vampire, leaves the film and is never mentioned again. We'll get to it in the review. We're going to be talking about the twins more now. Again, filleting the plot down as always, but I'm just going to be talking good girl, bad girl, because that's very much the part they are set up to play. So, bad girl Frida is invited by the Count, who is really enjoying this new vampirism thing he's got going on, to come up to the castle and let me show you around, maybe play a sound. You look like you're pretty groovy. It's a bit of Rocky Horror for you there. Um, in the castle, the Count turns Bad Girl straight away into a vampire with no if, buts, or maybes. So relatively early in the film, yeah, one of them is definitely a twin of evil for sure. The other girl, good girl, Maria, she has the unfortunate job of being very holy. So she stays home, doesn't get any carnal pleasures, doesn't have the fun vampirism stuff, just stays home and takes not just a beating from Peter Cushing for doing anything whatsoever, including breathing the wrong way, but she takes twice as many beatings because she then has to pose as her own sister to disguise the fact that her sister is creeping out at nights. So, yeah. How do you solve a problem like Maria? So poor Maria, good girl, has a lot on her plate. She does, however, take the fancy, or she becomes attracted to a young man in town. Young man means 45 in Hammer movies, called Anton. Anton has an he's more infatuated with Bad Girl, um, with Frida. Anton is aware of superstition and the macabre, but does believe it to be nonsense and made up. He's very quickly convinced when when there's a character played by Dennis Price, so I'm filleting out of this. He's the kind of servant of the Count. We see him being bumped off in the woods, but when a body turns up and we think it's just going to be the reveal that he was the body that was found, it's actually Anton's sister who was bumped off as well. So there was multiple murders that night, which instantly convinces Anton, yeah, something is going on. You know, there's the bites on the neck, etc., etc. Frida, bad girl, attacks a member of the Brotherhood the same night. So Brotherhood guy says, "Look, it was your niece. She's definitely a vampire, my man. I don't know what to tell you here, Peter Cushing, but she's definitely a vampire. We should lock her up." Now, Prince and the Pauper, anybody? They locked the wrong one up because there's been the whole confusion and covering for each other. They locked the wrong one up. When they go to the prison, the Count, this is where it starts to get a bit more convoluted and a bit Freaky Friday or something, or Parent Trap. The Count and Bad Girl also come in and do some switcheroo stuff. There's kind of shenanigan stuff going on in the middle of the film in the jail cell. So Anton at one point is talking to Maria, but doesn't know it's actually Frida, etc., etc. There's all sorts of farcical stuff involved there. Anton um, says, "Okay, well, they're going to burn you, so sorry about that, but I'll see what I can do on the day. Don't worry, but I'm sure it'll all work out fine." So Peter Cushing reluctantly allows his niece to be burnt at the stake as a witch, the one niece that he can find. He doesn't seem to question where the other one is. And Anton bursts into the scene and says, "Look, for God's sake, get a crucifix, hold it up to her, and we'll see if she's the right one or not." For some reason, that didn't occur to anybody at any point during this film, despite the fact they've known about the existence of vampires for most of the runtime. So they do that. She kisses the cross and races it, and everybody says, "Well, oops, oops." I guess we best listen to this guy then, who have completely decried the whole time. This Anton guy seems to know what he's doing. What do you suggest, Anton? Anton says, "Well, I know everything about hunting vampires now, even though I didn't believe in them 10 minutes ago. So tell you what, come with me, Gustav, Peter Cushing, bring the Brotherhood, and we'll go to Castle Karnstein and we'll destroy the Count. Remember, you can't burn him, you have to decapitate him, or you have to stick him through the heart. The Count and Frida, Bad Girl, try and get away, but Peter Cushing captures Frida and cliffhanger. Not in the actual film, just in terms of the review, because again, I don't like spoiling endings for people that may not have seen them. So I think there's a couple of things at the end that are, if not a surprise, then interesting developments. So I am going to leave it there, rather rather annoyingly, because even I was quite enjoying that retelling there. Review time, right? Whilst also trying to talk around the end of the film. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. It's got a lot of problems. First of all, if you're coming here again looking for uh, uh, Carmela Frankenstein, there's certainly no Frankenstein in here. I mean, there's Peter Cushing, but he's not bad in Frankenstein. Carmela Karnstein or Markella, then you're not going to find anything here bar one scene. She almost seems like a contractual obligation, so they can say, based on the characters by Sheridan Le Feu, not really. Tudor Gates wrote the film, and there is a sense that they've said we best do something different, and I just can't think of anything terribly different to do with that character. So let's do a more traditional vampire villain, but let's have the whole set of it. Don't mean literally the set, the construction. I mean the setting. Let's have that the backdrop be much more witchcraft. So that makes an interesting contrast, and it allows for the more Puritan aspects to be discussed and to be evaluated. So Peter Cushing is a horrendous villain because he's been personally responsible for the deaths of at least three, four young women that we know about. And he is not asking for evidence whatsoever. They are killing these young women just on heresy, hearsay, I should say, not heresy, the opposite. And nothing else whatsoever. They are doing it just on the off chance they might be right. It just so happens that his last guess is indeed correct. But essentially, he's a horrendous villain. He's not Matthew Hopkins from Witchfinder General, though, and critics of this film will say Peter Cushing's just playing Vincent Price in The Witchfinder General. No, 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 he was an unrepentant villain. Peter Cushing here is a villain of conviction. He's a very pious man. He has his beliefs, but to the very end, and again without spoiling the film, he believes what he is doing is for the greater glory of his God. 100%. There's no doubt. Cushing makes you 100% convinced that what this character believes he will die for willingly, no problem whatsoever. So Matthew Hopkins from Witchfinder General was a scuzzy villain who was in it for the money, and the more witches he caught and burnt, the more money he get paid by the local towns. That's not Gustav here. That's not him at all. He's a much more nuanced villain, a much more interesting villain who in another film you could have a good drama with. The girls, Madeline and Mary Collinson, pretty weak actresses because they weren't actresses. They were cast because we need twins, Basil, twins. They were playgirls of the era, but I mean, they do a fine enough job. Frida, bad girl, obviously has a more fun role to play. She gets to be vampy and camp it up a bit. And Maria has to be pious and holy. Not as interesting for her to play. Kathleen Byron as Katie is Peter Cushing's wife. They have a couple of wonderful scenes together, including one where she finally stands up for the good daughter and says, "You won't have her. You may have taken the other one, but you won't have her too. And that's a wonderful scene, which again is towards the end. So I don't want to go into the context of it too much. Suffice to say, the performance is great. The American advertising sold this as a great new vampire emerges with Damien Thomas as Count Karnstein. Damien Thomas, yeah, good actor, bloody good actor. He would be in what am I thinking of him from? He would be in Julius Caesar. He would be in Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger. He's the prince, who kind of well, stuff happens to in that film to say the least. But he's all over Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger. So decently famous actor going to solid creative character work. With loads of it's that guy actors, including David Warbeck, who pops up. He is Anton, the boring hero of the second half of the film. He's the one that kind of solves all the problems and figures everything out, puts two and two together, and talks rationality to the Brotherhood, to the Puritans. David Warbeck, I'm sure horror hounds will know much better from Ark of the Sun God and from Lucio Fulci's films, like Beyond, for example. Interesting to see him 10 years before all that here, but it's really boring. It's not anything new for Hammer to have their hero character be incredibly dull, but he is incredibly dull. Really is giving absolutely nothing. He's given nothing, but he gives nothing extra in return either. It's a bit of a shame. The film is directed by John Howe, who had an absolutely bizarre career. He ended up making things like Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry, which is such an American film for a 50-year-old British guy to make at that point. It's such a bizarre career that he had. But he also directed Legend of the Hill House, for example. American Gothic with Rod Steiger, a film that I picked on the Monsters Den for Chris Allo a couple of years ago for one of our Secret Satans. Bizarre career, but he brings a flair to it and he brings a structure to it that I think hasn't been there in a couple of these Hammer films where they don't take the time to step back and let scenes breathe. That scene with Peter Cushing and his wife talking on the stairwell, I think he is allowing that to breathe more than other Hammer directors might have done. I think it's a really, really solid directing job from Don Howe. The film was shot by, so our cinematographer here, we've talked all week about Arthur Grant's cinematography. This is, and no giggling at the back, this is shot by Dick Bush. Okay, giggle if you want, because Dick Bush. Anyway, Dick Bush. It's good, isn't it? Dick Bush is a brilliant cinematographer. He's actually one of my favorites. With taking all jokes aside, he shot Blood and Satan's Claw, which is one of my absolute favorite films of all time. But he also photographed such a lot of great stuff for Ken Russell, from uh, Tommy right up to Lair of the White Worm. So good 10, 15 years he worked with him. He would shoot Dracula AD 72 as well, but don't hold that against him. But no, he even was director of photography for William Friedkin on Sorcerer, which is a stunning looking film, just 6 years after this. So yeah, a real top level cinematographer, Dick Bush. Sorry, Dick. It's okay, he's dead now. And our score by Harry Robertson is wonderful too. Who's Scottish, so of course it is. But he has scored all of this trilogy. So we have the same writer and the same composer on all this trilogy. So he brings some themes back from Vampire Lovers and from Lust for the Vampire and interweaves them a little bit through here. So I think having the same writer and same scorer, the same composer, really helps establish these as being not Dracula, which essentially is what we've been exploring in Vampire Weekends, not Dracula. So to be able to do that with a whole trilogy, I think is really deft work from Hammer in terms of thinking, let's give them the chance to do that. Someone needs to do it anyway. Might as well give them the chance to develop the films into something. The bad, the bad. Where is Lady Karnstein. Where is Carmilla? She just vanishes. There's very little sense that this wraps up a story. There's just the sense that this is another adventure in the long lineage of the Karnsteins. Every 40 years, we were told in Lust for the Vampire, they come back. Why couldn't we have an 1881 and do something with that? But I mean, I suppose a prequel's an interesting, different way to take it. So is adding the witchcraft elements, but at the same time, kind of feels a bit like we're shoehorning witchcraft in because we just don't have any ideas how to do something fresh with vampires at this point at Hammer. We don't have any ideas, which is certainly true because, as we know, their next vampire movie after this is just going to be what if Dracula was in the modern day? Hmm, we know how that worked out. Not tipping my hat too much because I'm sure we'll review it in the future, but if you've seen my Monsters Den appearance and ranking the Dracula films, you know I'm not a massive fan of AD 72. I do quite like Satanic Rites of Dracula. So yeah, I think this is a really strong film in places, which I don't think thematically, if you want a trilogy, works particularly well. But if you just want a vampire film, which does something different and quirky and adds in witchcraft to it as well, and there aren't any witches, that's what makes it even more interesting. It's using the backdrop of the hypocrisy of witchcraft and witch trials, and the lack of, therefore, from the brotherhoods, the people who would hunt them down and accuse young women for the crime of, God forbid, enjoying themselves and having a good time. I think it's an interesting way to take that, the historical torture and the way women have been mistreated throughout history. So many we'll just call her a witch and get her thrown in jail or get her burnt or get her drowned. I think it's an interesting addition to the lore of this little mini franchise within a franchise. I best leave it there because I've been rabbiting on for even longer than usual. But yeah, it's the end of a trilogy, so it kind of needs a bit of a summation, I think. Join me tomorrow, won't you? As we will be doing our only entry this month, our only entry into modern Hammer, revived Hammer. Hammer has risen from the grave. So we'll be talking about 2010's Let Me In remake of Let the Right One In, and quite an interesting film. So join me tomorrow. I'll see you then, and remember, don't have nightmares.